Hi, welcome back to the Kaiser Report. I'm Max Kaiser. Time now to go to London. Talk with Steve Woolfe, city spokesman for the UK Independence Party. Steve Woolfe, welcome to the Kaiser Report.
Thank you, Max, and thank you for inviting me to your show. I'm really looking forward to being on.
All right, Steve Woolfe, your party, UKIP, is calling for Greece to return to the drachma. Talk about this.
Well, Greece has to return to the drachma, Max, because it's in their best interest. It's in the interest of their people, and it's also ultimately in the interests of the European Union and its people. They're suffering at the moment, as we know. We have levels of unemployment for the youth around 18–19%. There's millions of people unemployed throughout the country. There's lots of people losing their businesses. There is a real sense that the austerity that the Greeks are giving to them is actually hurting badly. And the reason that it's hurting and having no effect for a positive future for them is because they're trapped within the economic prison of the European Union. If they were able to escape the arms of Barroso and the commissioners who want to keep hold of them and their assets, they will be able to take control of their economic levers and help themselves get out of this debt crisis.
Okay, Steve Woolfe, let's talk about the ripple effects here, because the folks who are not against the haircut or the write-off or the return of the drachma, of course, are saying that the bond market would collapse, the Greek banks would collapse, ripple effect throughout the Eurozone. What do you say to this?
I think there would be some dark times ahead for Europe, either way. If we don't take and allow Greece to escape from this economic prison, then we'll see a long period of time where the European people have to pay for this massive debt. And we can talk about the EFSF and its extended bailout. I'm sure we'll go into that in greater detail. But if we do allow them, there would certainly be some form of ripple effect. But would that necessarily be as bad as the doomsayers of Christine Lagarde and the IMF and the European Union? I'm not so sure it was. What we're doing is, when we're hearing them say Europe will collapse into a mess, they are trying to scare us into not doing something that we should be allowing Greece to do, which is give them their freedom. There's no doubt, and I'm sure you hear this all the time, that Baroness Ashton and her team of diplomats are wandering around Washington threatening that if the bailouts don't occur, then we will have 1930s-style unemployment and recession throughout Europe. There'll be doom, there'll be gloom, there'll be the rise of the far right. That, I don't believe, will happen. This is them trying to protect their jobs, and they're also trying to protect this creation of a country called the United States of Europe. The ripple effect will be there, but don't believe it to be as bad as they are trying to paint out.
Steve Woolfe, can people point to Iceland and say that, well, you know, they basically defaulted, they took their medicine, 2 years later they're now growing? Is that an accurate comparison? And if so, why aren't more people making an issue of this and making that comparison?
That is a perfect example, as is also looking back to the days of Argentina and Brazil when they defaulted as well. They were given the opportunity to take hold of their economic levers. And let's look at the positive things that could happen for Greece. We know that they're indebted on a debt crisis with their bonds. If they were able to say we're out of sight of the European Union, they could take hold of their interest rates, they could look at their currency, they could take haircuts on their bonds of 60, maybe even 70%, they could devalue their currency at 30, giving themselves some leeway to 50%. This would encourage other businesses to come to Greece. Certainly would encourage those who are tourists from the UK going to Greece, if you've ever seen the prices in the holiday resorts in Greece at the moment. But also look at the very important positive factors of the Greek economy. Greece has assets, and some of those assets that aren't coming out into the public domain are their oil and gas reserves. We have received reports that only a few years ago, 7 Scandinavian companies were offering around 250 billion for the gas assets that are outside Crete, etc. Those are assets that could be used to help Greece in the future rebuild its country, but only if Greece was able to get hold of its own economic powers. It can't do it whilst it's trapped within the European Union.
Let's talk about the UK for a second, because the UK did not join the euro, and people are saying that they're insulated from the euro crisis. However, the banks in the UK own much of this toxic debt from continental Europe. And so what are the ripple effects, and how do they get into the UK? And what is David Cameron doing about it, if anything? Is he telling the people in Britain accurately what's going on here?
David Cameron certainly isn't giving the people of Britain the truth about the indebtedness that Britain is connected to the European Union. When you're looking at this bailout, we are having to pump billions into the IMF to support this. This is money that could be used to help the banks that would have to face some of the detrimental effects of Greece defaulting. We could use them to shore up the capital and increase the Tier 1 requirements of those banks. In addition, by being a member of the European Union, we spend around £55 million a day to the European Union. That money could also be repatriated back to preserve the economy of the United Kingdom whilst we're going through the bad times. David Cameron doesn't want to let the public know that we are contributing to these bailouts through other means, such as the IMF, and he doesn't want us to know the true effect of what would happen if Greece was to bail out, or the opportunities for Greece, because to do so would endanger this project of being in the European Union.
The crisis is unwinding in real time, and leaders appear to be paralyzed. Every talking shop leads to another talking shop. Their policy seems to just let this train wreck happen and then pick up the pieces afterward. There's no proactive policies whatsoever, and I'm sure that the pivotal country here is Germany. Let me ask you about Germany for a second, because on one hand, they have benefited by the cheap euro in terms of their export market, and it's the first or second biggest exporter in the world. On the other hand, if there's a huge consolidation due to a collapse, that'll most likely be run through Berlin. So they really are playing two sides of the aisle here. Is Germany, how do you see Germany in all this? As a kind of a hapless bystander to a calamity that no one saw coming? Or are they more behind the scenes orchestrating something here?
Well, I'm not sure that we can be safely certain that anyone's orchestrating this behind. I mean, I think you have to turn around to go to Horst Köhler, who was the former German finance minister, in 1992, when he said that the southern countries would not be bailed out by the northern countries. This is not what the euro was about. But actually, that is what the people of Germany believed. They never believed that their hard work or the taxes would be used to bail out any country that allowed themselves to get into substantial debt. They didn't also believe that we were going to have a country called the United States of Europe. So what you're seeing in Germany is a realization that for many of them, like many of us in the United Kingdom and the rest of Europe, have been fooled by a political class who have one agenda. If you take some of the polls that happened over the weekend, as UKIP have read and I've seen have been published, 48% of Germans now would start supporting a Eurosceptic party, i.e. one of those that believes they should get out of the European Union. But you have to ask yourself, why are they doing that? They don't want to see the danger of the bailouts affecting their country. They don't want to see their lifestyles affected in the same way. They know that if they put debt upon debt to build more debt, which is effectively what these new bailouts from the EFSF is. It's, a country default scheme. It's a large Ponzi scheme of debt derivatives. They don't want to be part of that because they know ultimately it will be Germany that is on the line. Their lives are on the line, and their businesses and unemployment could rise. They've seen it before. They don't want it to happen again.
All right, you talked about this Ponzi scheme, and of course, the global center of the financial Ponzi scheme is London. They've got the weakest regulatory environment, the most hedge funds, the most corrupt bankers. They're the ones who are really making a market in fraud most prominently throughout the world. And they have a stake in perpetuating this global Ponzi scheme and fraud. Otherwise, the entire city of London goes away, more or less, and they go back to being a utility bank of making simple loans and no more flashy Christmas bonuses or champagne parties anymore. Is David Cameron basically just completely in the pocket of the banksters at this point, and there's no hope for any accountability at all in the City of London?
Well, I don't think that David Cameron can be seen to be a supporter of the banks in the United Kingdom, or indeed the financial services industry as a whole.
But let me just cut in here for a second, because during the recent looting episodes in the UK, Cameron's out there castigating the looters, while at the same time he is petting and grandizing all of the looting bankers. He seems to be talking out of both sides of his mouth. I mean, either he believes in looting as a business model for his country, or he's against looting. He has to pick one or the other. The UKIP, I would imagine, has a position. What's UKIP's position?
Well, UKIP's position on the financial services industry in the UK is very clear. We must support one of our most important industries. Max, let's get some facts on this. Not everybody in the financial services industry in the United Kingdom are the rich bankers. There are 1.1 million people employed in this industry in places like Chester and Leeds, in Edinburgh, going down to Cardiff. These people are not earning the £1 million a year. They're actually earning safer salaries of around £20,000 to £25,000. These are the people that are going to get affected when Europe introduces financial transaction tax. We don't think about them. What happens here in the UK is we focus ourselves on about 1,000 to 2,000 seriously wealthy people, many of them employed by banks, some of them who have indeed done bad things, if we look at the ex-chairman of the OBS, for example. But that can't be applied to the whole of the industry as a whole. So UKIP is supporting them, whilst at the same time we don't support those who commit blatant fraud, who go out and commit serious crime. And that's why when you look at the offences that were occurred by the looters in the streets around the country, is you can't allow that sort of looting to happen with the purposes that they were intended. It wasn't about a political statement. They were simply out to try and steal from shops. And that would apply equally.
Or give them a banking license and have them work at Goldman Sachs or Barclays or HSBC and boost the GDP of the UK, because it's a country built on banking fraud. But let me jump to a tweet I got from the Max Kaiser Twitter account. This is from Mr. Canning, who asks, where does Steve see Sterling going as the Bank of England with more quantitative easing, while the euro hopefully possibly takes a nosedive? So how does the Bank of England's quantitative easing program affect the pound going forward, as you see it?
Well, I think really what's going to happen is more affect not necessarily what quantitative easing does to the pound. It's really what's going to happen in the United States to the dollar. I suspect that whatever quantitative easing that we try and do in the United Kingdom isn't really going to have a great effect. We will see the potential of inflationary issues going down in the future, and we must be deeply concerned about that. But really, we're caught between other sides. It's really what's going to be coming out of the United States and what's happening in Europe. We're trying our best, but we're still caught within this economic trap and this danger that faces us from Europe.
All right, Steve Woolfe, that's all the time we have. Thanks so much for being on the Kaiser Report.
Max, it's been my pleasure. Thank you very much. Take care.
And that's going to do it for this edition of the Kaiser Report with me, Max Kaiser, and Stacey Herbert. I want to thank my guest, Steve Woolfe.